Welcome to the 2021 Cooperative Agreement Guide webinar. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Stephanie Kozar. I am the VS Field Operations Cooperative Agreements Team Supervisor. When questions arise, please contact the Cooperative Agreement Administrative Officer, also known as the CAAO, and the Grant Specialist for your district. Please keep in mind this is the current Cooperative Agreement Team breakdown. This breakdown can change, and if we do determine we need to make changes, we will let the area veterinarian in charge, also known as the AVIC, and CAAOs know. As an aside, we refer to the VS programmatic contact interchangeably as the AVIC or Program Manager, which is sometimes abbreviated to PM. The grant specialists listed here will be assisting me with this presentation today. This is the fiscal year 2021 timeline for paperwork submission. The deadline for internal cooperative agreement packages for all recipients this year is January 15th. We hope to initiate most of the cooperative agreements prior to April 1st, making the need for pre-award letters obsolete. However, as we near March 15th, if your organization can participate in the pre-award process and your cooperative agreement has not been finalized, we recommend submitting one. We will only honor one pre-award for the first 90 days or first quarter. These pre-awards will not be extended, so your cooperative agreement must be finalized prior to the expiration date of the pre-award, which is June 30th. The CFR was recently revised on November 12, 2020. Cooperative agreements executed before November 12th will follow the previous CFR guidance. Any amendments or new cooperative agreements executed on November 12, 2020 or after will follow the new CFR guidance. Aside from that, there are no significant changes this year, but we do have a few reminders. As usual, our recipient guide is accessible on the web with working hyperlinks throughout the document. We will continue to use the work and financial plan templates, which together form the workbook. Tanya will be reviewing the templates further into this presentation. Please submit your initial work and financial plans at the initial funding level for FY20 and ensure your cooperative agreement amount is rounded to a whole dollar amount. The additional ADT funding for readers available last year was a one-time occurrence. Finally, we want to reiterate our commitment to providing you with the best support possible. Next, we will cover some pre-award information. Specifically, we will discuss applicant eligibility requirements, establishing user roles in Easy Fed grants, and the pre-award cost approval process. Listed here are the eligible applicant requirements. You will need a valid DUNS number, an active SAM account, and a USDA Level 2 e-authentication access to our online grants management system, EFG. Before applying for a cooperative agreement, please ensure your organization has registered or has an active account in SAM. This is required in order to receive payments from Treasury. To register in SAM, an organization DUNS number and taxpayer ID number is needed. SAM registration requires annual renewal. Please be aware SAM is free of charge. Therefore, you should not be paying to register or renew your registration in SAM. In addition to registering or renewing your registration in SAM, please ensure you have completed the certifications and representations information and selected yes to the question, do you want to apply for federal assistance? This process takes the place of submitting an SF424B, and we cannot process your application without the certifications and representation section completed in SAM. In order to apply for and manage your cooperative agreement, at least 2 individuals in your organization will need access to Easy Fed grants, which requires obtaining and maintaining USDA Level 2 e-authentication. Your agency must have, at minimum, 1 grants administrative official, also known as a GAAO, and 1 signatory official, also known as an SO, in Easy Fed grants. All cooperative agreements are finalized through Easy Fed grants. If you need access to the system, please reach out to your district CAAO or grant specialist, and we can provide you with step-by-step instructions for obtaining access. Lastly, Please note applications for cooperative agreements will not be considered if there are any outstanding, delinquent performance or financial reports from previous fiscal years. Cooperative agreements. So please ensure your reporting is current in the system before applying for your FY21 cooperative agreement. This chart outlines the recipient primary user roles within EasyFed grants and what each role can do. As mentioned, you must have at least one GAAO and one SO role, but it is best practice to have at least one backup in each role to ensure documents are not delayed. As you can see in this chart, the SO role is not able to create applications or claims, but they can prepare reports. Each role has certifying official listed as a secondary user role. The certifying official can review and sign claims and reports. This role only applies to a specific report or claim and is designated by the individual who creates the claim or prepares the report. Any user can be a certifying official regardless of their primary role. Claim creators or report preparers can even designate themselves as the certifying official for their own claims or reports. Lastly, you may notice repayment requests listed as an option in the role functions above and as a menu option on the EasyFed Grants homepage. Repayment requests are a type of claim in which a recipient returns funds to the federal agency. These funds may have been an overpayment of a reimbursement, or unused advance payments, or prohibited or unjustified costs. Currently, VS does not utilize this function in EasyFed grants. If your organization needs to return funds, then please work with your district CAAO or grant specialist for this process. Pre-award costs are costs incurred prior to the date the cooperative agreement is fully executed. Recipients must submit a letter to the APHIS VS signatory official through the Area Veterinarian in Charge, or AVIC, to obtain approval to incur pre-award costs. A link to the pre-award letter template can be found on page 5 of the guide. The letter includes length of time up to 90 days for which these costs can be requested, a justification explaining programmatic need to begin incurring costs, and an estimate of costs to be incurred during the pre-award period. Approximately 25% of the cooperative agreement award amount is anticipated. Reimbursement of pre-award costs is contingent upon a fully executed cooperative agreement. Therefore, claims cannot be processed until your cooperative agreement becomes active in EasyFed grants. You will know this has occurred because EasyFed grants will issue the award face sheet. Please note, verbal approval to enter into a cooperative agreement or incur costs is not valid and cannot be honored. In addition, if the 90-day pre-award period expires and an extension has not been approved, then the cooperative agreement start date will need to revert to the date of final signature, and any costs incurred prior to the start date cannot be reimbursed. As I mentioned earlier on the timeline slide, the deadline to submit your pre-award letter is March 15th. Now I'm going to hand it over to Lourdes to address the next topic, cost considerations.
I will be going over cost considerations, cost definitions, allowable and unallowable costs, publications and audiovisuals or outreach materials, laboratory equipment requests, IT acquisitions, and travel policies. These are basic consideration of costs you must keep in mind when creating your financial plan. Costs must be allowable, allocable, and reasonable. To be considered allowable, costs must be reasonable to accomplish the project, in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, not used to meet cost sharing or matching of any other federally funded program, and are adequately documented. To be considered allocable, costs must be treated consistently by the recipient, incurred specifically for the project, beneficial to the project, and necessary to the overall operation. To be considered reasonable, the amount does not exceed what a prudent person, given the same circumstances, would expect to incur. A quick reference of common cost types can be found in Appendix 4 of the recipient guide. The different types of costs are direct costs, indirect costs, cost sharing, and cost matching. Direct costs includes costs for personnel, fringe benefits, travel, supplies, equipment, contractual, and other. Next are indirect costs. Indirect costs are costs of an organization which are not readily identifiable with a particular project or program, but nevertheless are necessary to the general operation of the organization and the conduct of its activities. APHIS has a statutory cap of 10% on indirect costs for nonprofit institutions. Nonprofit institutions include both private and public organizations, such as colleges, universities, schools, hospitals, and others. Typically, state, local, and tribal governmental entities are not considered nonprofit. The statutory cap applies only to cooperative agreements. If the recipient's indirect cost rate is less than 10%, then their negotiated indirect cost rate applies. A de minimis rate of 10% may be applied if an organization has an expired negotiated indirect cost rate agreement and receives less than $35 million in federal funding. If claiming the de minimis rate, please contact your grant specialist. Lastly, if the recipient has a current signed indirect cost rate agreement, it must be submitted with the application when applying for the cooperative agreement. Cost sharing or cost matching, which can be found in 2 CFR Part 200.29, means the portion of the project cost not paid by federal funds unless otherwise authorized by federal statute. Please also refer to 2 CFR Part 200.306, cost sharing or matching. Veterinary Services has a legislative requirement of 40% cost share or match for brucellosis eradication activities. No other programs require a cost share or match. If the cost share ratio or cost match requirement is not met as stipulated in the cooperative agreement, action can be taken to reduce the next cooperative agreement, reduce APHIS's share proportionately, allow the reduced cost share when it is in the best interest of the federal government. Once the cooperative agreement has expired, adjustments to cost share cannot be approved. This slide helps determine allowable and unallowable costs. To find an explanation of allowable costs, you can use the following for your resources: 2 CFR Part 200, Appropriations, and the FY21 Recipient Guide. Examples of unallowable costs are compensation and travel for federal employees, federal subawards, land acquisition, promotional outreach and giveaway items such as calendars, pens, squishy balls, etc., vehicle purchases or leases, symposiums, conference, meeting, workshops, honoraria, research, construction, and major rehabilitation of buildings, bonuses or commissions, fundraising, international travel. Also, please use the program-specific guidance in the recipient guide to determine if there are any additional restrictions to costs. When using agreement funds for publications and audiovisuals, please use existing materials. If new materials is developed, it'll need to be submitted to the program manager for additional levels of approval. You'll be notified by the program manager of the final decision. Please allow a minimum of 2 weeks for review of materials prior to printing. Approval must be obtained prior to printing. Equipment is defined as tangible personal property, including information technology systems having a useful life of more than 1 year and a per unit value of $5,000 or more. If laboratory equipment is being requested, a laboratory equipment request form needs to be completed and can be found on page 7 of the FY21 Recipient Guide. This form should be used for any laboratory equipment purchases for all programs. If applicable, please include the completed equipment request form when submitting your workbook. The term information technology includes but is not limited to computers, network, and ancillary equipment, software, firmware, and similar procedures, services, including support services, and related resources. IT purchases may require an acquisition approval request or AAR to be completed. If it is determined that the AAR is needed, estimate a 2-week turnaround for the review process. For general travel costs should be specific to activities proposed in the workbook. Follow your state written travel policies when calculating travel costs. If there is no state travel policy, then the federal per diem rate should be used to estimate travel costs. For the Animal Health Association, or AHA meetings, either local, state, regional, or national, no more than 2 attendees per recipient combining umbrella and ADT cooperative agreements can be claimed. For out-of-state meeting or conference travel cap, for umbrella cooperative agreements, the cap is $10,000 or 7% of the total project cost, whichever is less. For ADT or other cooperative agreements, the cap is $5,000 or 7% of the total project cost, whichever is less. Items not subject to the travel cap are travel to attend trainings, workshops, and other working groups, travel to attend AHA meetings within your state. For example, if an AHA meeting is within your state, it is not subject to the out-of-state travel cap. However, only 2 attendees maximum can be included or reimbursed through the cooperative agreement. Registration fees for conferences and meetings, categorized as other in the financial plan. Additional justification will need to be provided to support an increase in AHA attendees or to raise the budgetary cap. Justification will need to be approved by APHA's signatory official. Now Tanya will walk us through the workbook.
This will commence our 3rd year using the Excel workbook templates for the umbrella and animal disease, or ADT, agreements. In the next few slides, I will go over both workbook templates. The concept and format of the workbooks have remained the same since their inception. The workbook templates will be used to create the work and financial plans, reduce the amount of time to review and approve work plans, be used throughout the life cycle of the cooperative agreement for accomplishment reporting, and create transparency to easily identify and ensure proposed activities are being performed. Here is a summary of what is included in the workbook templates. Although the templates are similar, there are a few differences. The main difference is that the umbrella consists of 2 workbook templates, a work plan and accomplishment template, and a financial plan template, whereas the ADT workbook consists of 1 template that has everything together. Additionally, the ADT workbook includes a software enhancement form to be completed when requesting the use of agreement funds for software enhancements to existing ADT systems. For additional information regarding this, please refer to the ADT goals and objectives under Section 2 of the recipient guide. A program manager checklist, which is an internal form used to evaluate the ADT criteria, have been appropriately addressed within the work plan. Therefore, the PM checklist may be a helpful tool when creating your work plan to ensure you are addressing ADT goals and objectives. Illustrated on this slide are the ADT and umbrella workbook cover pages that will need to be completed. The text in red font provides additional instructions. On the umbrella cover page, highlighted in green, includes a percentage chart. This chart will need to be completed and should accurately reflect the percentage of the funding needed to carry out activities for each program. Please note, you are not limited to prior year program percentages, and this chart will need to equal 100%. As you may notice, highlighted in red at the bottom of each example, the ADT workbook has 1 work plan and accomplishments tab, whereas the umbrella workbook has a work plan and report tab for each program: avian, cattle, One Health, SGCE or sheep goat, and swine. Please note, based on feedback from prior years, we considered adding a cross-program tab to capture activities that relate to multiple programs, for example, conferences and trainings. However, we feel this is already being accomplished through distributing costs across programs. Please continue to distribute these costs across the programs as you see fit, and realize that you will need to justify this distribution if costs are audited, so please document it. Here is an example of what the work plan and accomplishment report tab looks like for ADT and umbrella. As mentioned in the previous slide, the umbrella template will have a work plan and accomplishment tab for each program. The example shown here is for avian. Both templates will have a metric-driven goals column, which is highlighted in green. The content in this column is created by VS program staff and cannot be edited. Highlighted in yellow, both templates will have a proposed activity column that will need to be completed as part of your work plan development. If you do not have activities for one of the objectives outlined, then indicate NA next to the objective in the proposed activity column. If you have additional activities for an objective, please insert a new line for that objective. If there are additional objectives that are not outlined in the metric-driven goals objective column, please contact your program manager to negotiate and determine if the objective is within the scope of the project. If agreed upon, new objectives can be added at the bottom of the spreadsheet. Both workbook templates will have 4 columns highlighted in red, which represent accomplishment reporting for each quarter. Once the workbook is approved, it should be maintained throughout the life cycle of the agreement. Accomplishment data will need to be added quarterly to the workbook and submitted in EasyFed grants in Excel format. Lastly, the ADT workbook has additional reporting tabs within the workbook. However, the umbrella will have additional program-specific reporting templates, for example, AV and testing, which can be found in Appendix 11 of the recipient guide. Here's an example of the umbrella financial plan template. The layout is similar to the ADT financial plan. Just a couple of friendly reminders. Embedded on both the ADT and umbrella financial plan templates are instructions for certain cells. In order to see these instructions, you will need to place or hover your cursor in the cell that contains a red triangle at the top right corner, and the instructions should appear like the example circled in blue. Please note, if you have recipient share, please illustrate these costs in the corresponding column within the financial plan. As last reminder, additional lines can be added to the ADT financial plan. However, if additional lines are needed for the umbrella financial plan, please contact your grant specialist. When developing your financial plan, here are some things to keep in mind. Refer to Appendix 6 of the recipient guide. Appendix 6 outlines the types of details we are looking for when reviewing the financial plan. For example, for personnel, list the rate per hour and number of hours or percentage of effort and salary rate for each position. For travel, include the estimated number of miles and rate per mile for local travel. For out-of-state meetings, conferences, and trainings, include the number of travelers, total number of days, per diem rate, and lodging costs for each out-of-state event. For testing costs, if costs per test are included in the work plan and accomplishments tab, ensure those rates are correctly documented in the financial plan. Double check, or better yet, triple check all your calculations. If there are any discrepancies noted during work plan review, your work plan will require revision. Ensure the total federal amount is a whole number, no change. Submit a current copy of the negotiated indirect cost rate agreement with your workbook if indirect costs are included in the financial plan. Recipient cost share or cost match is not required except for a 40% match for brucellosis eradication activities. However, if you incorporate cost share or match and it is approved as part of your workbook, then it will be incorporated into your cooperative agreement and is legally binding. You would report any actual recipient costs on the SF425 Federal Financial Report and verify that you have met the agreed upon amount by the end of the cooperative agreement period. Lastly, keep a file of your supporting documentation to show how costs were determined. Next, Samantha will discuss application requirements.
I will go over the application process, notifications, documents, and reminders. Once your workbook has been approved, here is an overview of the application process. The opportunity information is emailed to the recipient. The recipient applies to the opportunity. The program manager reviews it. If revisions are needed, the application is sent back to the recipient. Once approved, a risk assessment is conducted using information found from sam.gov, a single audit, and the Federal Awardee Performance and Integrity Information System, also known as FAPIS. If there are no findings during the risk assessment, the application will be fully approved and the agreement will be created and routed for signatures. If we do find something, we may contact the recipient for further information. Here is an example of an opportunity notification. Once an opportunity is created, the program manager will receive an email notification that will include an opportunity number. The CAAO will then email you the opportunity number and additional instructions on how to submit your application. For application documents, the SF424 and SF424A will be completed in the system. Please note, the SF424A must match the approved financial plan. Forms to be completed outside of EZ-Fed grants and attached to the application includes the approved workbook, certification regarding lobbying for cooperative agreements exceeding $100,000, the SFLLL, the disclosure of lobbying activities for cooperative agreements exceeding $100,000 when there are activities to disclose, the SPOC letter, if applicable, and a signed negotiated indirect cost rate agreement, if applicable. Representations and certifications, also known as certs and reps, will replace the SF424B as it is no longer a required form. The financial portion of the certs and reps must be completed in sam.gov when renewing the yearly registration. This slide pertains to the intergovernmental review of federal programs, or commonly known as the SPOC process. Not every state participates. However, if your state does participate in this process, a copy of the response from the SPOC must be included with your application package when applying to the opportunity. The link to the current SPOC list can be found in Appendix 10 of the guide. You will be notified via email when the opportunity is ready for you to apply, along with an approved copy of the workbook, which you will need to upload with your application. New funding opportunity numbers are created each year. Do not use prior year funding opportunity numbers. Once an application is created, edit the application. Do not create a new one. The original created application should be accessed through the Actionable Items section in EZ-Fed Grants. On the SF424, under Block 16, list the congressional districts. For A, applicant, list the congressional district for your organization's headquarters location. For B, program project, list the congressional district where the activities will occur. You can list statewide or all in this block if needed. Under Block 18, include cost share under the applicant line if applicable. In Box 19, when making your selection, please choose option A or B. Option C is typically not a valid choice. On the SF424A, sections A, B, D, and F must be completed. Include cost share in sections A, B, and C when applicable. On the Additional Details tab, for the DUNS CCR exempted entity question, please respond with no. All recipients must have a DUNS number. In order to activate the complete signature option on the application, the signatory official will need to read and agree to the legal notice terms and conditions. For returned applications, please refer to the Comments tab for information on why the application has been returned to make corrections before resubmitting. Now I will start reviewing post-award processes, which include claim submission, reporting on both financial and performance, amendments, and budget shifts. For claims, EZ-Fed Grants does not automatically generate claims. When you are in EZ-Fed Grants, select Create Claim from the left-hand menu as shown in the screenshot to begin a claim request. Only one claim can be processed at a time. Claims should be submitted in chronological order with no gaps in time. When creating a claim, we request that you reflect the actual expenses by cost category in the Requested Amounts by Cost Elements section of the claim, or you may include the breakdown of expenses as an attachment to the claim. You may notice when the cooperative agreement is initiated in EZ-Fed Grants, the funding is allocated to the other line on the budget. This is due to some system limitations that do not allow us to properly reflect indirect costs and minor budget changes. However, we do track cost details to properly manage the cooperative agreement. Lastly, please keep in mind that both financial and performance reports must be current for a claim to be processed. Once a report is past due, the system will not allow us to process any pending claims. Before I go over reporting, I wanted to remind everyone about the naming convention for reports in the system. As illustrated in this chart, Easy FedGrants names reports according to the calendar year quarter. So please keep in mind when submitting your quarterly reports in the system. In conclusion, if a cooperative agreement has granted a no-cost extension, then reporting will continue with the same frequency as provided in the original funding period. For example, if the reports were due quarterly, they will continue to be required quarterly. Performance and financial reports are required to be submitted in Easy FedGrants in accordance with the frequency outlined in the award phase sheet. The report templates become available for submission in Easy FedGrants on the last day of each quarter. Reports are due 30 days after the end of the calendar quarter, except for the final report, which is due no later than 120 days following the expiration or termination of the cooperative agreement. All reports are grouped in a common actionable item list and are made visible to all users from the same organization, which include the grants administration officer, grant processor, and signatory official. Any of these users can open, complete, and submit the report. Users may filter reports by their name in the point of contact column. Once a user accesses a report from the common actionable items list, the report will be automatically placed in the user's personal actionable item list. Once the report is assigned to a user, it will not be visible to other organization users. This report assignment is valid for 1 day. All report edits and updates will be saved, including report status. If the report is not completed or submitted within the 1 day, the report work item will automatically be routed back to the common actionable item list for other users to act upon. If additional time is needed to submit a report, then please submit written requests for extensions to the program manager before the report deadline. The program manager will provide his or her decision in writing. However, even if an extension is granted, claims cannot be processed in Easy FedGrants until all required reports have been submitted. Please note, if the agreement becomes active after the first quarter report should have generated, the due date listed for the report will be inaccurate. Refer to your award phase sheet for the correct due date. Lastly, Easy FedGrants will generate 2 reports for the final quarter of the agreement, that quarter's report and a final report. Since we do not require 2 reports to be submitted, we will mark the last quarter's report as accepted, and you will only be required to submit the report marked final. If you would like to submit both a quarterly report and a cumulative report, then please attach both to the final report in Easy FedGrants. Next, let's review how to locate reports in Easy FedGrants. This is a partial view of what you see when you log into Easy FedGrants. In order to complete your reports, you must access them through the actionable items on your home screen. Select reports from the drop-down in the actionable items section. Then click on the report that you would like to complete and submit. When the reports generate, they are now available in a common actionable items section for all recipient organization contacts, which include the grants administrative officer, grant processor, and signatory official. Any of these users can open, complete, and submit the report. In conclusion, reports can only be edited through actionable items. Currently searching for items in Easy FedGrants does not permit you to make edits on them. Financial reporting. Please note some fields will be auto-populated by the system, whereas others will need to be completed within the form. Since this is cumulative report, ensure that the amounts shown in the form reflect cumulative amounts, including the information for indirect costs. If there are indirect costs, Block 11 must be completed. If a new rate has been negotiated, attach a copy of the newly signed indirect cost rate agreement to the report in order to support the change in rate. If you have a cost share or cost match that has been approved as part of your cooperative agreement, reflect your share of the expenditures in the recipient share section. On the final financial report, an amount should not be listed for federal share of unliquidated obligations. If there is an amount listed on this line, it usually means we have advanced funds to you that have remained unspent by the close of the agreement and would require repayment to us. If you have funds that have been paid to you but remain unspent, then work with your district CAAO to return the funds to us. If there is an unobligated balance of federal share on the final federal financial report, this amount will be deobligated in the closeout process. Performance reports. As mentioned earlier, the workbook includes space for quarterly accomplishment reporting. Therefore, please use the workbook to update your accomplishments each quarter to correspond to the proposed activities. When completing the performance report in Easy FedGrants, we request that you upload the workbook accomplishments and any additional required reports to the Attachments tab of the performance report instead of using Block 10 performance narrative. When attaching the reports, please indicate See Attached in Block 10 of the generated form. Double check that the correct attachment is included. Once the report has been submitted, it can be returned by the program manager. However, if it is accepted by the program manager, it cannot be edited and any corrected reports would need to be submitted via email. In conclusion, some of the reports require additional reporting. These reports can be found in Appendix 11 of the guide. Some things to keep in mind, specifically for avian testing goals report, are use the Excel spreadsheet provided in Appendix 11 of the current guide to report avian testing. Some updates have been made to the form from last year. Report data for the current quarter using the correct quarterly tab. Only attach the report in the Microsoft Excel format when submitting an Easy FedGrants. Property and equipment reporting. Recipients are required to maintain an inventory and conduct a physical inventory every 2 years for property and equipment purchased with cooperative agreement funds. This includes items purchased under prior year cooperative agreements. Currently, there is no OMB approved inventory report for use. Please use the inventory log spreadsheet provided on page 33 of the guide until an official inventory report is posted to the OMB website. Please note, if you will be getting rid of property or equipment purchased in part or in whole with federal funds from the current cooperative agreement or prior year cooperative agreements, then please contact your program manager or district CAAO for disposition instructions first. Next up is Aaron, and he will be discussing the amendment and closeout processes.
In the next few slides, I will be going over changes that may be needed once the cooperative agreement is in place. Amendments are changes that require a prior approval. They may also result in a formal amendment to the agreement in Easy FedGrants. Types of amendments are as follows. Changes in scope. Even if there is not an associated budget change. Note, changes in scope cannot be approved after September 30th due to the federal appropriations limitations. No cost extensions. For extensions of time, written justification including why approved goals and objectives were not met during the original performance period must be received at least 10 days prior to the expiration of the cooperative agreement. Only one extension can be granted for up to 12 months. An extension will not be approved solely to spend on obligated funds. In addition, extensions may affect the start of the next cycle's cooperative agreement depending on the justification provided. Another reason for an amendment would be to increase or decrease the cooperative agreement's amount and/or cost share. Furthermore, an amendment would be needed in the following instances. Changes or disengagement for more than 3 months or 25% in key personnel. Inclusion of costs that require prior written approval in accordance with the CFR. Transfer of funds budgeted for participant support costs as defined in the CFR. subawarding, transferring, or contracting out of any work, not including acquisition of supplies, materials, equipment, or general support services. Finally, we would need an amendment for budget shifts. Since the most common request we see are budget shift requests, I'm going to cover this in more detail. Budget shift requests should be submitted in writing to the program manager and address the following 5 questions. What is the amount of the shift? Justification to explain why the shift is occurring. What direct cost category is the funding being shifted from and to? For example, from personnel to travel. Will the original objective still be met? Will this shift impact the scope? Any scope changes must be made prior to September 30th, as mentioned earlier. With this being said, if the cooperative agreement is over the simplified acquisition threshold of $250K, and there is a cumulative shift of more than 10% amongst direct cost categories, then you will need to submit a revised financial plan and SF 424A along with the written request for the budget shift. Even if shifts do not meet these conditions, we request that any shift in your budget be communicated with the program manager so that we can determine if the scope is being impacted, whether changes are allowable, reasonable, and to track cumulative changes in the approved budget. In addition, all requested shifts must be received by VS no later than 30 days prior to the expiration of the cooperative agreement. VS will inform the recipient in writing of the decision. Written approval is needed prior to implementing any changes. Lastly, VS may not approve budget changes to allow purchase of general purpose equipment in the last quarter of the performance period if it appears the modification is being made to use unobligated funds. Examples of general purpose equipment include office equipment, GPS, cameras, and computers. Here is the workflow for an amendment in EasyFed grants. Please note, not all amendments require all these steps to become active, and some steps may occur outside of EasyFed grants to initiate the amendment. An example would be a no-cost extension. Now, let's go over closeout. Eligibility requirements, notifications, and retention. A closeout is required on every agreement once it has ended or if it has been terminated. A closeout cannot be created for an agreement when it is being amended, which means the agreement is being modified. If there are any missing reports, if the claim is being processed, if there is a third-party active audit pending litigation, or if the agreement has not reached its end date. The system will send automatic reminders to the recipient at least 30 days prior to the expiration date of the cooperative agreement. As you can see here, this is an example of the email sent from EasyFed grants when the agreement is ending. Your organization has 90 days after the agreement expires to submit all final reports and the final claim. If there is an unobligated balance of federal funds listed in line 10H on the final financial report, the process to deobligate these funds will be initiated. Retention is required for purposes of federal examination and audit. In accordance with the requirements set forth in the CFR, once the agreement is closed, all records pertaining to the agreement should be retained for at least 3 years from the date of submission on the final report. When an agreement is under an audit or compliance review, records must be retained for 3 years after all issues are resolved. If you didn't know, there are several useful resources available to you. Here are a few helpful links. The first one is to our current fiscal year guidance. The second is to the Code of Federal Regulations. The last link will take you to the General APHIS Terms and Conditions. These are the standard articles you agreed to when signing an award face sheet and EasyFed grants. On the EasyFed grants landing page, there is a training link that contains several job aids and helpful tips. We highly recommend visiting these resources if you are unfamiliar with EasyFed grants. If you have any questions or comments regarding this training, please direct them to the email address you see on the screen. Thank you for joining us today. Bye-bye.